suitable for peaceful transition. It seems that, unlike, unfortunately, Bashar Assad promised some reforms in the early days of the Arab Spring, promised some changes, some reforms, but maybe due to the family, Bashar Assad family, it did not happen. So, given the integrated aspects of Turkish and Iranian relations, from energy issues to uranium to some other economic issues, I don't expect any serious conflict on Syria. They will try to cooperate because any settlement, any stability in Syria are to the benefit of both Turkey and Iran.
I'd like to make 3 comments. The first is the Iranian people are very cognizant of the fact that Turkey was the 2nd or 3rd country to congratulate Ahmadinejad on his re-election, even prior, before the Supreme Leader gave his official blessing. That is a memory that will last. So that's just on one thing. I think if there is a change in Tehran, it's a memory that will fade quickly, but it's a memory that's there nonetheless. My second point is on the relationship between Turkey and Iran. Bilaterally, as you mentioned, I think there are 0 problems on a bilateral sphere between Turkey and Iran. Regionally, however, I think it's different. I think the visions are inherently incompatible with each other. I mean, Turkey's vision of the Middle East of the 2020 or 2030 looks very different from the Iranian vision. And as both states engage to push to realize those visions, I think the Turkish one is, I'll simplistically say, of an economically and socially interdependent region with Turkey as a hub or major player. That's incompatible with a region that's bifurcated and partially dominated or in partnership with the Iranian hegemon. I mean, I'm simplifying, but these are the 2 visions as such. Iraq, we saw last year, this competition can really come to the fore. You had Turkey backing a different electoral alliance as in Iran before the election and after the election. So the competition really comes out to the fore. I think in Syria, it's unclear. At this stage, I think the interests overlap, where ideally the Assad regime maintains control and there's stability returns to Syria, and then I think Turkey and Iran will pursue different strategies as to how to engage it, but I think the short-term goal is the same. One thing I didn't mention in my presentation, and this affects how Syria the ripple effect on the Turkish-Iranian relationship, is the nuclear issue. One big benefit of this Arab revolutions has been that the nuclear issue has receded from international attention, from international pressure, and Iran will probably has benefited from this vacuum, and it will continue in terms of advancing the program. The moment Iran actually crosses that red line and is seen to be of having the capability, nuclear weapons capability, the Turkish-Iranian relationship will change very rapidly.
Just to add on that, is that the reason, or does that have any relationship to Stuxnet virus and the post-Iranian program now lags behind the prior?
I think it's a mix of factors. One is, as you mentioned, inherent problems in the program that have, I guess, lessened the urgency. But I think also it's been hard enough to get I used to work at the United Nations, so it's been hard enough to marshal diplomatic efforts to get the Russians and Chinese to back the Libya resolution. So a lot of political capital and time and energy is simply spent on other issues, and the nuclear issue has simply receded. There's just a limited time and energy. But my point is, that moment when that red line will be crossed one day, the Turkish-Iranian relationship will change, because then the different visions will be so incompatibly, and the power dynamics will shift so dramatically that
in favor of.
Well, the Iranians believe in favor of themselves, and I think the Turks fear that may be true.
Sure. Make a quick point on that. I think it's a really good point, and it also does go, and I think, to one of the real revelations, or perhaps not a revelation, but one of the truths that's been exposed in this Arab Spring is just how much Turkey is invested in the regional status quo. I think there's a lot of voices here in the United States, especially after the flotilla incident, that have tried to paint Turkey under Erdogan as now in the radical camp, you know, the dichotomy that Yousef talked about, radicals versus moderates. I think that was always untrue, and I think it's even clearer now that it's untrue. They have a vision of their role. It's new and it's bigger, but it's still to a certain extent invested in the region as it was. So I think the way that they've been sort of discombobulated between some of these relationships shows that.
Hi, my name is Sehir. I'm a Lebanese media consultant, and I also work with different NGOs in Lebanon. Actually, my question, first I want to strongly agree with Yousef's opinion about the media in Arab and media in general. And I think really they have like a big responsibility of having this blood flow and bloodbath in Syria. Because if we were responsible more as Arab media, maybe we could expose more Syrian regime in this thing they are doing. Well, actually, my question is for you, Elliot. I want to know how much do you think, to what extent that Iran regime will be using Hezbollah in Lebanon to restrain the success of the Syrian revolution and its opportunities to succeed. And I also think that if you agree, is it possible that Hezbollah can do any kind of military actions against Israel in the time being, also to move the concentration of what's happening in Syria toward the Israeli borders? Thank you.
I think that's a very difficult question, a very good question, one that I ponder myself. I think the Iranians think that this is basically one of the plans on the in the drawer on the shelf to pull down, is to either agitate on the Israeli-Lebanese side, or to use Hezbollah within Lebanon or Syria to promote its interests. I think that's obviously one of their considerations. The question I have in return, and that's something that I'm not sure of, is to what degree Hezbollah is suddenly seeing the map being redrawn and may have interests of its own that do not align with Tehran. That's something I do not know, and that's the question I would throw back at you. To what degree do you feel Hezbollah will become more of an Arab and Lebanese player versus an Iranian partner as the dynamics shift?
Well, maybe we can have a cup of coffee and we can discuss this.
That's a good point. Last question. I think we're almost done. Our panelists, do you want to add anything for me? Okay, I just want to add one more thing then. I mean, in terms of, again, I want to go back to Elliot's question. So in terms of Turkish position, like I spent a couple of weeks in Turkey in the last couple of weeks. So depending on my observation, I think right now Turkey sent a couple of different groups to like Syria to pressure on the Syrian regime and to teach them how to deal with, for example, civilian protests. So there were some people from security establishment, people from development agencies, people from like foreign ministry, all different kind of people trying to educate like Syrian like officers. So we'll see how it's going to be ended. But right now, depending on my observations, again, Turkey's position seems like trying to push more and more on Syrian regime to go forward with the will of Syrian people, but try not to turn this into a civil war, to not to hurt more the Syrian people. We'll see how this paradox will be solved in the next couple of weeks, maybe months. So thank you all for joining us. We have inside Turkey issue here. The last issue is focused on Arab Spring. If you want to check out, we have a couple issues here. You can just see what's going on. Thank you again for joining us. We'll see you at our next